Welcome, everyone. I'm Sue Barber, author, former IT director for a Fortune 500 company, turned executive coach, and this is the Visibility Factor podcast, where we explore how to raise your visibility and play bigger at work and in life. We'll explore key topics and welcome guests that help you shift your thinking about yourself so you can see new possibilities for your leadership. I'm on a mission to create a visibility movement for leaders to show their value and be seen for their true talent. Are you ready to take the next step towards a higher level of visibility for yourself? Let's go.
The Visibility Factor is brought to you in part by the Choose Your Life Challenge. Do you feel like it's too late to do something new? You have a good life and your basic needs are met. You have a place to live, a job that provides enough, and friends and family to share it with. But it's all passing by so quickly, and it feels like you're running out of time to do the things you wanted to do. Join Danielle McCombs and Christy Allinger, co-hosts of the Opposite of Small Talk podcast, in a 30-day interactive experience that helps you to live a more intentional life. Through a combination of live sessions, video coaching, and digital social interaction, you will be guided through a series of ideas to explore your mindset and gain confidence to live the life you want. Sign up today by visiting theoppositeofsmalltalk.com/challenge. Use promo code CHALLENGE4 for a 20% discount. That's theoppositeofsmalltalk.com/challenge and promo code CHALLENGE4.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Visibility Factor podcast. This is Sue Barber, your host. I am so thrilled today to have my guest, Nathalie Pincham, here today with me, talking to you about success. I think it's going to be a great conversation, and I can't wait to hear all the things that she's doing, and I know you're going to learn a lot from her. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for having me.
That's so exciting. Okay, so let's go through maybe a brief introduction about yourself so that everybody learns a little bit about what you do and your background, and then we'll start the conversation.
Okay, so I am a success and business coach. I work with high achievers who've checked all those boxes of success, but they're feeling really stressed and really overwhelmed. And like that sense of internal success is out of reach, no matter how hard they work, right? They can get things done, but they are not getting closer to the things that really matter to them. So I love the work that I do. I'm passionate about it. And I love seeing people move into their potential and start to go for their biggest goals and dreams and start to realize some of these biggest goals.
I love that because I think everybody doesn't always take the time to think about that for themselves and spend the time on what they really, really want. How did you get to this place of really wanting to focus on success as an area for coaching?
Well, I think that it's come around from my own personal experience of working really, really hard and then eventually hitting rock bottom, like full on burnout, and realizing that what I was doing was not getting me any closer to really achieving the things that I most wanted in my life. My life was great. It all looked good. My business was going well. Everything was kind of, I checked off all those boxes, and yet there was something that was really out of alignment, and I was really, really struggling. And I feel like that rock bottom moment was actually a huge, powerful turning point because it had me really tap into what I really wanted to do and how I wanted to line up my energy to really go towards the things I wanted to achieve, and to start to move towards the things that I hadn't had the confidence to go towards before. And I really believe that as we start to play bigger and we start to step into leadership, we can start to drive positive change because we impact those around us. And when you start to do that, I mean, it's literally contagious. It's so exciting to see other people go, oh my God, that story you told, it opened up my thinking. It changed everything for me. I mean, so that for me is where I really decided that this was where my experience and my talents all came together in a way that just made so much sense. So that's why I'm obsessed with success and what it means and how we can really find that authentic feeling of success.
I love that. So you and I speak the same language about a lot of things that you just said there, that's what I love about you. You know what I think is interesting about this? You talked about them being authentic. You talked about them playing bigger, and really just how they can create this person, this life for themselves that's different. What do you think prevents them from doing that?
I think that a lot of us, especially those of us who are high achievers and very driven to get results, we still don't have the tools that we need to really reach for the things that we really want. And I think that what happens when we can get caught in a really negative cycle. You know, high achievers will, when they're faced with a challenge, they'll dig in and they'll work harder, right? They'll put more effort in, and what happens is they end up burning out. But the cycle is that they work harder, they still don't get the results that make it feel worth the sacrifices that they're making. So they get more frustrated, and then they work harder and they still keep trying to figure it out. And what I've discovered is that many high achievers are actually afraid to make mistakes. They're afraid of the unknown, and deep down, they're afraid that they're not good enough. And they're afraid of being rejected. So they live their lives trying to please other people. And part of that involves shrinking themselves to fit in. And so that's not a great place to be. We don't thrive when we're shrinking ourselves in.
Yes, because I have been there, and it's not a good place to be at all.
No, it is not good.
Oh, wow. So have you seen, I think there's been a lot of studies and everything, in the last few years, specifically around people's mental health, burning out, and all of that. Have you seen a tremendous increase in your own clients or in companies that you're working with? And what do you think the solution is?
I have. I've seen a big uptick in that. And I think that in most of my clients, that sense of overwhelm and stress is actually the number one thing that's holding them back. And yes, and I think that's why a lot of people are talking about it now, which is great because it wasn't being talked about enough before. And I think it's chronic and it's an epidemic. There's so many people who are living with this level of burnout. And part of that is that the modern world is just so demanding of our time and attention. We have so many ways of making demands on other people's time now that we didn't have before. And the expectations just keep ramping up. You need to be contactable 24 hours a day. And it's just the standards that we're setting ourselves are about production and results, and not so much about balance and giving ourselves space to grow and breathe and be. And I think that this is where, when things get so out of balance, we just can't actually be productive anymore. And that cannot be the one and only thing that we all focus on. We have to think about the space for rejuvenation and growth and just enjoyment of life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is very true because a lot of, companies that I've definitely been a part of or seen, that is not the thing that's rewarded, right? Taking space and time is a luxury that many people don't get to experience. And for those leaders who do recognize that, I think it does help their teams get more creative, have more innovation, be able to think about where the company's going or where their department's going. But not giving the space to do that, it just is, I'm picturing like when you were talking about not being able to move forward, I picture them like being on this treadmill and they just cannot get off. They can never stop and they just have to keep getting faster. They don't get to slow down ever. So what are things that you do with them to help them work through this?
It really depends on where the biggest pain points are. For someone who is a business owner, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. Sometimes the focus is going to be around creating a life plan, which they haven't necessarily thought about, and then aligning that with the business plan. So creating a coherent plan for both life and business that actually makes sense and supports all your goals, not just your productivity and income goals, but also your well-being goals and your dreams, like traveling or whatever else. And that's all really, really supported by tapping into your core values. So core values and really identifying those, that is a really big part of the work that I do with all my clients. It can actually take some time to dig into and really identify which are the ones that we want to build our lives around. And then, yes, that's something that I work with executives as well, like really doing a deep dive around that. And then the next phase of that is really around understanding the ways that we show up energetically in the world. So I use a toolbox that's built around energy leadership, which really helps people identify the way that they show up currently, how they show up under stress, and the disconnect between those two things is really always so stunning. When you get your results on that, you're like, what? But it makes so much sense. And then the third part, which is so empowering, is getting to choose how you want to show up going forward. And we can literally start mapping that out and moving towards showing up at a much higher level of energy and enjoyment and connectivity with others as well.
It's almost like taking, where you're feeling this negative energy and redirecting it into something positive, right? Because action always removes fear, helps you move forward. I love that. And I love the idea of the plan. I'm actually recording a podcast about that as well today. So this will be a good follow-up for this one. And what's interesting, I just met with a client before we got on to record. And when you were talking about the overwhelm and burnout, he was starting to feel just not in a good place. But he thought he was sick. He thought he was getting the flu. And as he kind of kept waiting for the fever to show up or some, none of that happened. And he realized that's not what's happening. I'm actually burned out. I'm so low energy that I thought I was sick, but it's actually something else happening for me. So it seems like that might be a sign, right? Where you start to feel run down, tired, don't have a ton of energy. What are other signs that people could look for that tell them they're on this path to overwhelm and burnout and they might need to pay attention?
So some of the things to watch out for is not experiencing the same kind of enjoyment out of your work and your personal life that you used to have, or doing activities that used to, light you up, and they're not doing that anymore. It can also be just this feeling like you were just describing about being on a treadmill and like, okay, I got to gather all my energy and throw myself into this project because I have to. But really, you don't have a sense that there's going to be a good outcome, you're going to pour all your time and energy into it, but you don't have the sense that when I do that, I'm going to be closer to what I really want, or closer to the person that I really want to be, or that the outcome is going to be meaningful to me. When you start to have that sense that you're just pouring energy out and nothing is coming back in, nothing is feeding you in response, then that's a pretty sure sign that you're getting on a path to burnout. And that when we start to feel burnt out, we can start to see that a lot of the ways that we're spending our time just don't truly feel valuable to us. Not really, not when we dig in, and we're not feeling, we don't have the inner resources and capacity to restore ourselves and to, resource ourselves and come back at things with a fresh perspective and fresh energy anymore.
It's almost like I wish there was some class that they would teach in, high school or college, right? That talks a little bit about that, because I think I was listening to a podcast earlier this morning and the whole topic was around self-care. And that was definitely something I was not great at. And I think it's just understanding the importance of that and taking the time to do that, which is also something I think many leaders in companies don't think about, right? They also are very much on the treadmill of getting things done, and that's what's important, and that's what I'm going to be measured against, and that's how I succeed. Are you doing anything to help people think about their self-care differently? And are you seeing that in the people that you're working with? Definitely.
This is a huge component of addressing the burnout, is thinking about strategies that really help. And in fact, one of the first things to do is to not overload them with a lot of strategies and things to do.
Right, exactly. That's a good point.
The first things that high achievers do is they create a list, and then it's another thing on the list. So one of the ways we start to address it is to start taking things off the list, start to unweight the list. So there's fewer things to attend to every day, but to make sure that the things that we are paying attention to are, helping to create some balance and are restorative, that there's something in the day that's restorative as well. So that's a big part of it, is to move at a pace that is supportive and not overly burdensome. So I don't give my clients like 15 things to do this week, because that's never going to help. And then we really zero in on the thing that is going to make the most difference, so that within the next week they start to feel a little bit better. They start to see some gains, and then we can say, okay, so now we're going to do this. So I think that's really crucial, is to that's where having a coach is really so helpful, because they can say, this is the thing that you need to do this week because it's going to make the most difference. And then if you do that, it really does. And it's amazing.
Yeah. So magic, right? So have you ever had anyone, when you tell them, like, this is kind of the thing you need to do, and if I think about myself and what my calendar would have looked like back when I was still working, multiple meetings at the same time, day in, back to back to back all day, what kind of resistance do you face from people? Because I would imagine if they were like I was at that point, I can't not be in these meetings. I can't avoid these things. I have to do them. What are some things that they're telling you? And then how do you help them see that that's maybe not a good thing?
Right. Yeah. And this is the thing I do get a lot is, but I have to go to all these meetings. I have to. And so that sense of obligation of having to do that because it's your job, or it's your family and you can't say no, that is very, very hard to start to create some space in there. But by creating, by really looking at everything that's on the calendar and looking at what your values are, what your priorities are, we can start to find a few things that we can say, these aren't the highest priority. So that meeting that you have every Wednesday at 1, it's nice to have, but it's not a need to have. And so we're going to address that. Let's see, what needs to happen, what communication needs to happen so that that meeting could maybe happen once a month instead of every week, or just via Slack instead of face-to-face, things like that. So how we really troubleshoot around those places where there is some space and where boundaries need to be drawn. So, for example, I have a client who was taking calls right till 11 p.m. at night from her office. And she works in a very high pressure environment. And she felt that was absolutely what she had to do. But she has young children, and it just made her evenings so stressful. And she wasn't enjoying time with her family the way she wanted. She didn't have time to exercise. She didn't have time to cook when she wanted. So together we worked out a way for her to just communicate that she needed to finish work at 6 p.m. every day and just leave work behind for those, it wasn't such a long time because she would go back into work at 6 a.m. the next day. So really she just needed to breathe. So then she had this amazing experience of having her evenings back to herself. And, when she communicated that to her boss, he was actually super supportive. He was like, yeah, of course you need to have your evenings to yourself. And then they figured out a whole different way of communicating and doing a touch point meeting first thing in the morning instead. And it shifted things for him as a result. It made her more productive when she showed up to work. She actually got promoted shortly after because of the amazing work she was doing. So there's such a... looking at your schedule and really digging into, is this actually essential, or can we shift some things here and give you a bit more of, the life that you really want?
Oh my gosh. Thanks for sharing that. 'Cause that is very impactful, right? Just to show it's the changing of the schedule, but it's also asking for what you need and what you want.
Yes.
And I think that is something traditionally that doesn't happen. For fear of, they may not say yes, or they may tell me that's not possible, or they may hold it against me. Some cultures are very much like, you got to do what you got to do to get this job done. And if that means you work 12 hours, you work 12 hours. But I think it's not healthy, and it's not good for the person. They need to recharge their batteries and have time to think. Otherwise, they just, it's like the treadmill again, all over again. So
yes, exactly.
So I want to read this to you because I captured this from what you put in your guest form to join the show. And I just found the language really cool. So I want to share this out loud and then have you respond. So your success program that you offer to people is described as something for people with online businesses who focus on a hustle first, inner work later approach. And I'm wondering how much of that is that person feeling like that's what they have to do, and how much of that is society or other experiences that they've seen that they have adopted. Which do you think is true? Is it more culture and society driving that for them, or it's really just who they are and what they want to do?
So that's a great question, Susan. Thank you. I think it's a bit of both. So on the one hand, I do think that it's the industry that you're in where the majority of people are in this kind of hustle culture, and all the messages that you're getting are that you need to hustle or you're going to lose. Right? Everyone who's hustling is going to be further ahead than you, and they're going to win and you are going to lose. This is a really strong negative messages, right? It's like, I have to keep up with everyone else. And then the other piece of that is, as an aside, is that everything is changing so fast. The way that we work is changing so fast. So there's this constant need to keep up with innovation, with what works now, with, that's so last year, you can't use that strategy anymore. No one's doing that, so you're just out of the loop because you just didn't keep up with us, So there's a lot of that that's driving the hustle. And then there is the personality. There is the high achiever personality, the very driven person, those are the people that I specialize in working with. And that is very much the psychology of that person is I have to perform at my best, even to excellence. I have to bring excellence every day, all the time, to everything I do. Now talk about setting an impossible standard again, so put those things together and you are going to end up at some point hitting a wall because it's too much to carry.
Yeah, it's very pressure filled, right? I think about, even my experience in corporate, and then I probably have, kept some of those habits that maybe are not the best habits of working a lot. But I think the challenge for me is different. In corporate, I had a lot of expectations that I needed to meet and deliverables and all of that kind of stuff. But now it's, in your own business, you love it so much and you want to work on it. And so it's a different feeling of working a lot. It feels like, okay, this is for me, what I wanted to do, what I wanted to create, and it's happening. And I can see that it's making a difference. So how do you help people in that situation where it is what they love to do? It's just maybe not the best thing for them to do so much.
Well, actually, that's something that I personally have also had to grapple with because I absolutely love what I do. I think about coaching, personal development, business development in my free time. I'm just, this is what I live and breathe all the time. I love it so much. So I relate. And when you think that way, then your business becomes a vehicle for bringing your greatest gifts to the world, right? And so you start to see that you can make a difference, you can make an impact. And so, of course, that's just going to light that fire even more for you. But I think again, if we really dig into what are your core values, what is it that you're truly wanting to achieve? And then when we isolate goals that maybe are not completely tied into the business, that we need to prioritize at the same time. So let's say that one part of your business is, driving revenue, but then maybe another key goal is around your health and well-being. So instead of saying, well, I'm going to prioritize the business and the revenue first, and then I'll look after my health, which is what a lot of us do, right?
Yes.
That doesn't work that way. If we don't have our health,
it comes later. I'll worry about that later.
Exactly. So if we start to really, be taking into account that you need to prioritize your health goals as much as your revenue goals, then that starts to shift how you're going to spend your time, how we map out, the goalposts along the way, the milestones that we want to reach, and then that's when it starts to get so easy to create balance, because then it's like, of course I'm going to go to my 9 a.m. yoga class because that makes me feel so energized, and then I'm so much more productive at work. And then when I go to the next thing, I've got I can convert all the people in the meeting over to what I'm trying to sell. So it's just it starts to feed on itself. This new way of thinking about bringing meaning into everything that we do.
I love that, because you're really talking about not putting yourself last, right? You as a person are just as important as your business. And the goals that you have to align on both sides, right? It can't just be a one-sided focus on your business, because if you're not taking care of yourself, how's your business going to be successful at that point, right? It's going to suffer.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay.
Yes.
That is amazing. Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up. I think that is something that everybody needs to think about, whether you're working in your own business or whether you're working in corporate. I've said many times on the podcast, self-care was just not something I even understood for a really long time. It was just not on my radar. And so now that I know about it, I try to find ways to work that in. And next year is really going to be my focus on that a lot more. So I'm excited to hear what you're sharing, and it's making me think about ideas for myself. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, so we are going to transition into what I call the Rise Up and Be Visible quick tips. And so I'm going to ask you 4 questions. I'd love to hear your responses. The first one is, visibility is, and then fill in the blank.
Visibility is about being fully expressed, finding your voice, speaking your truth, and contributing your greatest gifts to the world.
I love it. And you keep saying that, and I love that. Contributing your greatest gifts to the world. I love that. Oh, that's amazing. Do you have advice or a tip that you could share with the listeners on what you have done to be visible?
One of the things that I struggled with for a very, very long time was living in what I think of as like chronic invisibility patterning. And I always made myself small. And when I hit rock bottom, like when I did hit that burnout phase and I had to kind of recalibrate everything, I realized that, these invisibility patterns were actually, they were there to keep me safe. And I think that one of the reasons we are wired for invisibility, just as much as we're wired to do other things, is that safety piece. And then in the coaching work that I did, I started to really see how that was limiting the results I was getting in my life. And then at some point in that process, it became clear that my calling required me to stop dimming down and start being invisible. I think that in terms of a tip for visibility, it's to acknowledge that the way you've been showing up in the past has served you well, and not to be harsh with yourself, not beat yourself up and say, wow, I just spent 25 years playing small and not being visible. Because I think that is another thing that we tend to do. And so instead, just honor that you are at a space in your journey, a space and time in your journey that you are ready to step into visibility and speak your truth, because it does require courage and it does require, that support. So give that support to yourself first.
That just makes me so happy to hear you talk about that. Invisibility patterns, I think, is a really good way to say it, because we don't realize we're doing it. And I believe, too, that you will never be visible if you don't believe you're safe, and that it's okay to be that way. And so I think that's one of the things I've realized is trying to make sure that people feel safe, but teaching other leaders how to do that for their teams and for their people, so that they can, have some visible people out there in the world doing great things.
Yeah. So that sense of safety is crucial.
Absolutely crucial. So what is one piece of leadership or career advice that you were given that has helped you the most? So
when I first started working with a coach, he'd worked with some pretty high-powered people, and he generated like massive results for the companies that he worked in. And so I was completely in awe of him. I was completely intimidated by him. I just couldn't believe that I was getting the opportunity to work with him. And after a few sessions with him, I asked him a question about the direction that my business was going in, and how I was so frustrated with, the lack of growth. And he said something to me that really shifted everything in lots of ways. He said, "You are so much further ahead than where you think you are, because you're showing up you're willing to ask questions, you're willing to make mistakes, and you have that deep desire to serve. And so in that moment, I went from feeling small and invisible to deciding, you know what? I am showing up, and what I'm doing might not be perfect, and my voice might not be big, but when I show up, I know that I do make a difference, even if it's just to one person. And so I'm just going to keep doing that, and there was such a huge knock-on effect from that moment and that decision.
Wow. Oh my gosh. That is really powerful and really helps you shift in a big way. I love that. So
yes.
It's amazing. Okay. Last question. What books have you read recently that you love and would recommend?
Well, the book that I'm reading right now is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I absolutely love this book. It's been on my list for a long time, but I finally opened it, and now I just can't put it down because it's actually really easy to read, and all the research and psychology that he presents is done in such a way that it's actually easy to absorb and really backs up his points. And I think the gist of the book is that making tiny improvements on a daily basis adds up to a big change, even if the results are hardly noticeable at the very beginning. And this is really opposite to the thinking that I grew up with, certainly, and a lot of people that I know, in that, you had to make sweeping changes and grand gestures and big launches and, no, not necessarily. So I think that this is a very empowering book. He shows you how to create good habits, how to break bad habits, how to play to your strengths. But, this crucial idea in the book that I love so much is that if you just get better 1% each and every single day, you'll be almost 37% better by the end of the year. And then this cumulative growth and change has just massive, massive results. So I love this book, and I'm telling everyone about it right now because I think it's so good.
Okay, so I have a quick funny story to tell you about this. So one of my clients was his wife's college roommate, and he was writing the book while they were in college. No. Or I think his wife was in college. I'm not sure if he was. But the funny story is they kept saying, "Are you ready to go out? We need to go out." And he's like, "But I'm writing." And they're like, "Oh, just put that book aside." They had no idea, obviously, that this book was going to explode in the way that it has. And so they always kind of joke around like, "Oh, he's just writing some book." Like they had no idea that it was going to become this massive, impactful book for everyone. So
I love that.
I'm always like, gosh, you know him.
Yeah, I know. That's amazing.
Like, yeah. He was at my wedding. Yeah.
And it shows that he practices what he preaches, because that's exactly what he's saying.
Exactly.
It's like, show up every day and big changes happen. He made that happen. For sure.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's so cool. All right. So if anyone would like to get in touch with you or reach out and talk to you, what's the best way to do that?
The best way to do that is to go to my website. It's www.storytonic.co. And there's lots of good stuff there, including links to my podcast. And I would love to hear from anybody who's listened to our interview today, Susan.
Oh, that would be amazing. Well, can you share a little bit about your podcast? I think it would be great for people to know a little more about it. And I know you're just getting started with it, but I was lucky enough to be a guest that you'll be hearing from soon. But I think share a little bit about it.
Thank you, Susan. Yes, I just launched it, so I'm super, super excited about it. I'm having so much fun doing it, including getting to interview you, which was so much fun. We had just a great conversation. And so I started this podcast. It's called Your Success Tonic. It's specifically to help high achievers who are ready to step into their biggest and most exciting vision of success. And so I want to use the podcast to share tips and research and inspiring conversations with amazing people like you around defining authentic success and how we find more freedom and abundance on the other side of that. So I'm very excited to share that with everyone.
Yes. Well, I know people are going to take a lot away from that just because of the conversation today, right? They're learning from you in this conversation, and they're going to get to learn from you every week on the podcast. So yay, I'm so excited for you. I know that that's going to be great. And I can't wait for both of our episodes to come out.
Me too.
Yours on mine and mine on yours, right? Yes, exactly. Well, thanks so much for being here. I learned a lot, and I know everyone who listens is going to hear some small nugget that they can take away that I hope makes a difference for them and how they think about success, how they think about burnout and overwhelm. It's not easy to work through that. So I'm hoping everybody who's listening can take away some tips that will help them.
Thank you. Yes, me too. I hope that this was helpful. And thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I really appreciate your support and having an amazing conversation with you. And showing up in such a powerful way for other people. So thank you, Susan.
Hey everyone, I just wanted to leave you a quick message and say Happy New Year to all of you. It has been a really interesting year for me, and I'm sure for all of you. I hope you get to spend time with your families and have a happy and healthy new year. And I will see you back in 2023. All right. Thanks everybody for joining today on the Visibility Factor podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks so much for listening to the Visibility Factor podcast. Remember that visibility starts with small steps that are intentional and consistent each day. Be bold, be visible, be the leader you were meant to be. Find us and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you listen to podcasts. Follow us on all of our social media platforms, which are highlighted in the show notes. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Visibility Factor podcast.